Yo, what's going on, everybody? We are back, and it is a brand new episode of Bets and Banter. This week, we're talking UFC 293, and we can't do it alone. We're bringing back another special guest, a friend of the show. You guys know him. You expect him on this channel with some frequency. Our guy, JWB, Just Win Baby, in the building. How you doing today?
How's it going, bro? Yeah, all good. Hot as fuck. Hot in the UK. Hot in New York, apparently. Fucking sweating it out.
Absolutely, man. And I don't know what the weather's like down under, but it's not the hottest fight card on paper, but it's still a pay-per-view event. I think it's a little bit higher quality than the average fight night offering that we're getting. So overall, excited to talk about this card. And like we always do on Bets and Banter, my man, we're going to start at the bottom and work our way on up. Shout out to the sharpest chat in the game. Make sure you drop a like on this video as we get started. Let other people know that we're here. Shout out to our guy, Joe Midas, says Liam with that plus 450 banger on Tuesday night. That's part of the value of giving a pick without looking at the lines first, right? I had kind of just said, Hiberio seems like a guy who creates volatility. I feel like if he was a massive underdog, I would take that pick. And so I didn't even end up getting to the window with that, but these are the kind of things that I'll always try and give you guys a fresh look at these fights, an independent analysis, and I'll be right sometimes, I'll be wrong sometimes, but I'm always going to just try and give you guys what I got. So with that being said, let's start with this first fight of the night where we got Kevin Gousset taking on Kiefer Crosby. And this is a Frenchman, right? He wasn't on that France card last week, right? He could have been in Paris, but instead he trains with City Kickboxing. And this is the City Kickboxing show. Make no mistake, there's a lot of City Kickboxing fighters on this fight card. They're being set up for some level of success, some level of showcase, some level of presentation. Doesn't mean they're going to win every fight, but it does mean they're peaking at the right time. The whole camp's active, working together, training for this fight. So I think that could only be to their benefit, broadly speaking. But now let's talk about this guy, Kevin Gousset, specifically. I don't really see a ton of great skill from him, right? He did fight Jack Della Maddalena. He hit a nice Osotogari, I think they call it, right? I'm not a judo guy. I'll never pretend to be a judo guy. I come from a wrestling background. We call that a hip throw, like a hip throw, a hip toss, right? He kind of hit like a nice step through wizard throw. But outside of that, I feel like I didn't see a ton in the tape that was jumping off the page at me about this Gousset guy. On the Crosby side, I found some things that were alarming. Granted, it was all the way back in 2015, but this guy's getting submitted easily via Kimura against Rostam Akman, kind of like holding his arm after. It was a whole weird situation that he had there. So I didn't like the look of his grappling, broadly speaking. And I saw some other flashes of that, like in Cage Warriors when he got submitted by Daly. So I don't really believe in either of these guys. I was asked earlier how I felt like this fight was going to go. I feel like somebody's getting finished. I feel like there's huge defensive liabilities for both of these guys. They both take damage while they're out there. They both kind of trade a little recklessly at times. So for me, I just feel like this fight's probably ending violently, but I don't have the strongest feeling about which side's going to win. How do you feel, Rich?
Yeah, I like the Crosby side. I think Gousset is a bit of a bum man. I don't like the regional scene in Australia fighting with a Hex and external. He's had some, dodgy opponents, to be honest, and he's faced adversity in those fights. On the Crosby side, I guess I'd be scared if it went past round one. I do think Gousset, for all the things I don't like about him, he is athletic. He has got a good build, but he just lacks the technical things, in my opinion, like the takedowns. I know he's got like a judo black belt or whatever. But when he gets people to the ground, he doesn't really hold them. A bit like Spivak last week, which is why I liked Garn so much. I thought maybe he could get it there, but he's not a great wrestler. He's not going to be able to hold him down. And Crosby, he kind of does the Derek Lewis thing, explodes up, uses strength to do that. I seen him against Alex Oliveira, KO'd him. It was quite nasty, very violent. I do think he's going to win in round one here. I'm not ruling out the sub, but it's most likely a KO. And the reason why is because when I watch this Gousset guy, he wants it to be at range. He wants to calf kick you, a bit like Jack Jenkins, wants it to be a pretty slow-paced fight. And Crosby ain't about that, man. He's a decent boxer, fast hands, good combos. I think he's going to bum rush him. And Gousset doesn't move his head off the center line. He kind of shells up with a high guard, which allows for the body shots. And Crosby's just too violent, man. Throws like 3-4 punch combos. And I think he's going to find him and get a KO in round one. That's my prediction, man.
Yeah, and that kind of aligns with what I'm saying here. I think that the chat is kind of hitting on the other element of this fight. You touched on it as well. The cardio of Crosby, maybe not super convincing. He seems like one of those guys who's like a musclehead, got a bunch of good minutes to offer you in the early going, but can he really sustain it over the long term? Especially he is the one flying in here as opposed to a guy from City Kickboxing, a little bit more local. So I think later on in this fight, it's definitely a Jusette live type of situation. But in the early going, the physicality, sometimes length can be a disadvantage, right? When somebody's just trying to barnstorm you, shoot fish in a barrel, basically push this guy back against the fence and hit him. He does seem like he takes a lot of damage. That Jack Della fight was a doctor's stoppage, but I'll tell you what, if it went to the third round, I feel like Jack Della would have had his way with him there. He was getting easy takedowns. That was the thing that was really alarming for me, is that Jack Della was out wrestling him cleanly throughout that fight. And so it does make me think somebody with the physicality and, again, the size, sometimes it's an advantage, sometimes it's a disadvantage. I think in striking, primarily, it can be a disadvantage when you're kept at a far distance. But in this case, number one, he's going to try and close it down with power shots. But number two, he's lower down on this guy's hips. He could probably get easier access to takedowns against a guy who hasn't really shown a proficiency defending it. He likes to do a lot of tricky throws and things like that. And at the UFC level, I just don't really expect that to work. So
yeah,
I'm leaning violence here.
Let me add a couple of things as well. This Jusette guy, he only turned pro in 2019. So he hasn't been fighting all that long. And you made some good points with the Jack fight. He was done after round one, man. Jack could have finished in round two. You could see it visibly in his face. He was ready to quit. And in my opinion, that doctor stoppage, that was all down to him. He was the one telling the doctor, like, I'm done. I'm not sure whether it was a cut on the eye. But he quit in there, man. He told the doctor, like, I'm done. I don't want to carry on. So I hate to see that. And yeah, it seems like he struggles with physicality. He's going to back up to the cage. Yeah, like I'm going to trash Jack Jenkins later on. He's a one-trick pony, man. He's got calf kicks. That's about it. And if you're worrying about the jiu-jitsu for Crosby, he is a brown belt recently. He did a tournament in 2022, so only last year. So he is improving. And his two losses in Bellator, one was against Georgie, who I can forgive him for because they're just night and day in the jiu-jitsu department, in the experience. And the fight, I think it was Charlie Leary who TKO'd him in round two. He's just a tough guy, man, durable. The shots Crosby was hitting him with, this Jusette guy would crumble. So, yeah, I give him a pass on those two losses, man. So his record is a little bit deceiving. But, yeah, Crosby all day for me, and I love the number, man.
Yeah, and Rich, to be honest with you, again, I try and not look at the lines as much as I can, to give myself a unbiased perspective. And I expected, to be interested if this was like an under 2.5 minus 150. It's like minus 118, minus 120 to the under 2.5 here. So definitely going to be eyeing up violence there in the first fight of the night for me. Next up, brother, we got Shane Young taking on Gabriel Miranda. Speaking of violence, I see this being a very violent affair. Gabriel Miranda, guy that's not really about his defense. He's about his offense. He's about trying to pursue takedowns, get the fight to the mat, use his submission game. He's a black belt out of MMA Masters. Couple MMA Masters fighters going to be on the card. So he's not going to be alone out there in Australia, but he is 33 years of age, cutting down to featherweight for the first time since 2018. So that's a little bit of a red flag for me on that side. He's also coming off a brutal knockout loss against our guy, Benoit Saint-Denis. Cashed us that nice ticket in the TKO in Paris. We told you guys. And when you're looking at a fight like this, Shane Young, he's never inspired me. I've never thought highly of him in the UFC. I think I faded him with Omar Morales. I faded him with a couple guys. But I also get to this fight and I'm like, Gabriel Miranda is probably not being brought in to win, right? He wasn't being brought in to win against Benoit Saint-Denis. He was being brought in to lose there as a sacrificial lamb, but he was plus 280 in that spot, And Benoit Saint-Denis, guys, he's a murderer. We just saw it over the weekend. Thiago Moises, world champion, good record in the UFC, winning record prior to that fight, had fought all these tough guys. Many of them he went to decision. He got blasted out of there by Benoit Saint-Denis, much like our guy. But you know something else? Aside from a couple rolling knee bar attempts, Thiago Moises never had a chance in that fight. He never looked like he had one offensive successful moment. Whereas you look at this guy, he actually took down Benoit Saint-Denis. He went out there, pursued some hard shots on the feet. I thought Benoit Saint-Denis was rocked in the first round. So when I see those things, I'm like, man, this is at 155 against a guy who, frankly, was competitive enough at 170, right? Like Benoit Saint-Denis is a big 155er. and this guy can make featherweight. That's just two different sized individuals. Shane Young, he's not that big for featherweight. He's just a normal sized guy. So for me, I feel like, again, this is a violent fight. I think Miranda spends himself early pursuing a sub. Shane Young never been subbed. So that's why I don't feel as bullish about it. I like to see proof of concept. We talk about that a lot on this show. But if you just said, like, who's a better grappler, who wins if they do jiu-jitsu, I mean, I don't think it's fucking close. I think Miranda smokes him. So for me, that's enough to say it's a dog or pass situation for me personally, but I also feel like fight doesn't go to decision for this one because Miranda spends himself trying to win, right? He will go for it. And a couple of guys on the regional scene let him off the hook when he was completely gassed, let him go to a decision. I feel like Shane Young, with the crowd behind him, with a kickboxing background, could probably take this guy out on the feet if he's gassed out. So give me the fight not to go here as well. I like violence to start us off.
Yeah, I don't hate that. Yeah, it's funny, man. You mentioned a jiu-jitsu match. I think if they did have a jiu-jitsu match, Miranda would win on points. He's not going to win this fight. He's going to lose. It's just whether Young knocks him out in round 2 or 3. He's down at 145. It's not going to bode well. He's got to travel as well. He's 33 years old. And yeah, you got to give Shane a pass, man, for his last 2 fights against Builder and Omar Morales at 145, who's a big fucker. Their footwork was amazing, man, especially Builder. He was on his toes for the whole of the 3 rounds, and Shane just couldn't find him. Miranda, not so much, man. His stand-up sucks. He is okay at jiu-jitsu, but he's more submission over the position. He gets a bit wild with it. He's fought a guy called Rocha, who's a good jiu-jitsu guy, and he TKO'd Miranda. Yeah, Young all day for me. And another thing we'll let you all in on, when you've got guys like Giuseppe, Blood Diamond on the early prelims, when the arena isn't even full, not everyone's even there yet, they're expendable, man, on the Aussie card. You know, the hometown fighters, no one gives a shit about them. But when you're on the main card and you got Pedro, Tai Tuivasa, you know, the bigger stars, Allberg, who's coming up and doing well for himself, obviously Izzy, they're the ones who are likely to get the wins, not the ones who are burying on the undercard. But saying that, Shane Young, he is part of that crew. He is getting a favorable matchup. And yeah, I think he gets it done. TKO in 2 or 3 is like 600, 800. Don't mind them looks even, man.
Yeah, I don't hate that. You know, I feel like for me, it's either a Miranda sub in the first 2 rounds or it's Shane Young, you know, TKO round 2 or 3, or, you know, worst case scenario, it hits the scorecards. But I just feel like more often than not, you know, a guy like Miranda, especially coming off of a knockout loss, that's either going to turn him into a really conservative fighter, but then you look at his track record, it's like, no, that's not really what he does. Like, he's been hurt before, he's lost fights before, and he comes out the same guy, wild, going for the subs. I just think that in terms of size, you look at this fight on paper, Miranda is going to be 3 inches taller. He's at a small reach disadvantage here. So I just feel like he might, you know, while he's fresh in the early going, get on top of Shane Young and just submit him in the first round. But to your point, you know, it's just a question of, if he doesn't do that, does he really have much more to offer? And I think the answer there is no. He's 33. He's probably not going to put on many more skills. And featherweight, by the way, it's not a place where you last very long when you start to age out a little bit. So Shane Young at 30, he's no spring chicken, but he is a guy that has more UFC experience under his belt, more UFC rounds. He just seems like a little bit more fleshed out as a talent, but I've just never been inspired by him. Always looking to fade him. So not going to change my tune here. Next up, we got Blood Diamond taking on Charlie Radke, Chuck Buffalo. And I just watched some tape on Chuck Buffalo before this fight. You know, I don't know exactly what to make of him. He's got a decent set of attacks. You know, he's got a powerful left hand. He can get on top in some of his fights. I felt like his jiu-jitsu, his scrambling left a little bit to be desired. Luckily for him, he's fighting Blood Diamond, you know, who nobody would ever remark positively on his wrestling, his jiu-jitsu. His last fight, he had an opponent who was completely gassed out, wasn't able to put the screws to him. So definitely some red flags on the Blood Diamond side. He's 35 years of age. You know, how much improvement can we expect from him fight camp to fight camp? But he is also the longest layoff on this card. I noted that in my research this week. Longest layoff on the card is Blood Diamond this week. I think it's over you know, a year. So the guy's been putting in some work with the CKB crew. Can he put in a better performance? Rich, you tell me.
I could be really nasty, but I'm not going to. I keep it short. He's just filling in for the Aussie card, man. He's proved his worth, which is nothing. He's 0-2 in the UFC against trash opponents, especially his last one against Kosi. It was a back and forth war. It shouldn't have been if he's any good. He's touted as like this decent kickboxer. I'm not seeing it at all. I think at the first bit of adversity, he quits here. I think he knows that his run, is coming to an end. He got in the UFC, didn't pan out how he wanted it to be. 35 years old now. And yeah, on the other side, I like this Radke kid. He seems like he's got solid jiu-jitsu, cage fury champ, fought some good competition in Austin Hubbard, Gonzalez. So yeah, decent guy, man. And I love the ITD for him. I don't see Blood Diamond lasting, and I don't see Blood Diamond knocking him out. It's a great parlay piece, man.
So we've got, just for reference point, Blood Diamond is going to be 2 inches taller here, 5'11" against a 5'9" opponent. He's going to have a 4-inch reach advantage as well. So I think that, there's some merit for Blood Diamond as an underdog in this spot. I do believe, but I'm not there. I'm not there to play it. But I'm just saying, when I look at this guy Radke, he does seem like he's throwing a lot with the left hand. He does seem like he's throwing a lot of these kicks on one foot, and I just feel like he's a guy that could get cleaned and get knocked out. He doesn't look like a very big guy for the division. I think he took this on short notice, if I'm not mistaken. Or am I bugging about that? Did he have full camp for this?
I'm not 100% myself, man. I don't care if he took it on 2 days' notice. He's going to smash him.
Fair enough. And yeah, I mean, he does look like the better fighter on tape. I just have a weird feeling about it because I do think the UFC would prefer if Blood Diamond could get a win across the line. I mean, they've given him a very soft level of competition. Kosi, like that guy is like one of the lowest level guys in the division. So the fact that he lost to him is an indictment, but it's also like, I can see what the UFC is doing. They're trying. They're by hook or by crook, and now they just signed a new guy, to come in and do the job. But I do feel like another guy out of MMA Masters, a guy who's put together a pretty decent run. And we've talked about this before. Sean Orr, shout out to Sean Orr, had come on the show before and mentioned he had run regressions in the past on how different regional organizations have performed in the UFC, right? And CFFC fighters have statistically overperformed many of the other organizations. East Coast, baby, stand up. You know what I'm saying? But when we're looking at a fight like this, we do have a CFFC champion who has a couple good wins under his belt over undefeated fighters, getting finishes in those fights. That's just way more impressive on paper than what Blood Diamond's done. So I don't feel like I need to go lay the minus 275 on a UFC debutant, but I also feel like he's just a better fighter. So seems wide that wins, like a wide favorite that wins. So
they've nuked the subline as well, bro. The subline was in the 200s, and I think it was sitting at like 140 now. So a lot of actions come in on the sub, and so it should for Radke. I think when it hits the mat, I think Blood Diamond's obviously a fish, and it's game over.
The thing I'll mention though is I wonder what the KO price is going to be, because this guy seems like aggressive as shit, dude. Like on the feet, he's throwing big punches. And when he takes it to the mat, he's not afraid to open up with some ground and pound as well. He has a slick back take, though. I will say that was what I noted in the grappling. That's where I was like, yeah, Blood Diamond's not doing that shit. Like that. There is no footage you will find of Blood Diamond hitting a back take like that. So that makes me think he's probably just in over his head in the UFC.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Next up, we've got a lightweight matchup between Nasrat Haqparast and Landon Quinones. And I've made a bunch of money fading Nasrat Haqparast in the UFC. I just don't think this is the one, brother. Landon Quinones, he seemed like he had a little bit of hype and acclaim on The Ultimate Fighter, and then he goes out there and just shits the bed pretty quickly against Jason Knight. Not a great look. Jiu-Jitsu looks underdeveloped for this level. I don't think much of Nasrat Haqparast, tell you the truth. Like I said, I've been fading him for profit throughout the way. I've been betting Bobby Greens of the world against him. I bet him for 1 unit against Dan Hooker, and I decided that night I'd never bet him again. I bet him at like plus 163. He's out there getting out wrestled easily by Dan Hooker every round. I'm like, wow, this guy's just not it. Because he's been around for a while. Both these guys are a similar age. When you look at some of the measurables in this contest, I'm like, man, is this too wide a line inherently? Just because Nasrat, not one to normally go out there and do many things. He's not consistent to go shoot takedowns. He's not going to out volume you by 1 million strikes every time. And his power kind of comes and goes like the wind. So I just don't believe in this guy too much. I do think his opponent's a complete sell job. I'm never going to bet Landon Quinones, I don't think, in the UFC. But I just feel like I hope Nasrat Haqparast knocks him out in the first round so I could fade Nasrat Haqparast next time out at a good price. What do you think, Rich?
Yeah, that's a good angle, man. Yeah, I'll keep it short, man. I think Nasrat at -500 here is a bit wild. I don't think he should ever be that price, man. He's had a year off, had hand surgery. I think you should all be careful if you're thinking about playing Nasrat by KO, thinking it's going to be easy because Quinones got subbed in the first round by Knight. I think we should all be giving him a bit of leeway for the Knight submission. Knight's jiu-jitsu is slick, and so was the triangle that he threw up when they were dry. So you got to give him his allowances for that, man. Quinones, great cardio, peppers you with shots, pushes you against the cage. I think this is likely to go to decision for Nasrat. I do think he wins because it's short notice, and I do think Quinones is just happy to be in the UFC, especially given he lost on, tough in the first round. He shouldn't really be here. So UFC's thrown him a bone, take the short notice fight, take it L, and then you get another opportunity later down the road. But yeah, Nasrat by KO, can't trust him, man. He is coming back after a layoff, so he's going to be a bit rusty. Surgery on his hand. He might not want to throw it as much, so it might be low volume, just get the W. So yeah, I think overs are good in this one, man. That's what I'd be looking to hit.
The one other thing I'll note before we move off this fight, I do a social media report every week. Nasrat Haqparast, sneaky huge on social media. Multiple demographics that he represents. Yeah. It just seems like the guy's got a global, international fan base for whatever reason. So more power to him. Nasrat Haqparast, a low-key star, and he's been pushed way down the card, given a guy who's around the same age but way less experience. It just all points to the UFC trying to get him back on track. I mean, they kind of invested in him. They moved him up the card a little too quick. He got starched by Drew Dober, and they were like, okay, let's reevaluate where we're at with this guy. So I think they're trying to get him back on track with a win here.
Another thing as well, bro, he was supposed to fight in Paris, Nasrat. I'm pretty sure he's a Muslim, so that would have gone with the narrative for the Paris card. So they were looking to get him a win. He's an Ali Sleaze guy as well. I think he's the only dominant MMA guy on the card. So that goes with that narrative. So yeah, I definitely think they're setting him up for a W here.
Interesting. Next up, brother, we got Jamie Mullarkey taking on John Makdessi. And I've been sharing some tweets of information about this one. You got John Makdessi coming off of 5 surgeries in the last 2 years. He's 38 years of age. He's not performed well as an underdog. But on the other side of things, you got Jamie Mullarkey. He was knocked out 3 months ago by a featherweight. So now he's coming back here. He's been knocked out 4 times in his career. He's been knocked out several times at the UFC level. The referees that were in the Brad Riddell fight hate him for whatever reason. They just let him die many times in that fight. So should have been stopped via knockout. Instead, it wasn't. But Jamie Mullarkey has taken an insane amount of damage in his not very long career. I think his durability is long-term questionable. And his run as a favorite includes a win via split decision that most people thought he didn't win against Michael Johnson, and 2 losses via knockout brutally in the UFC. So I'm just like, I am not betting Jamie Mullarkey as a favorite, period. Now, on the other side, am I, super enticed to bet on a guy like John Makdessi? No, I'm not, because John looked a little flat in his last fight. He just signed with Iridium. I don't really know where he's at in his career long-term. He seems like a guy who he's been a UFC lifer, but never a guy that the UFC was behind, if you know what I'm saying. John Makdessi is like a guy that fills in cards, a guy that can put on a fun show, plug it in my laptop so we don't die here mid-show. And when I look at a guy like Makdessi, the things that are interesting and make him a live underdog, in my opinion, is that he's very hard to finish. Most of the guys that finish him, they finish him with head kicks. So, like, you look at a Donald Cerrone, he broke his face with a head kick. You look at, what's his name, Lando Venata, spinning kick to the head. That's how he gets put away. He's gone with boxers. He's gone with long guys like Bahamondes. He spars everybody. He's not that good, but he's been smaller than everybody's ever fought in the UFC. So the idea that, like, oh, he's smaller than Jamie Mullarkey, he's going to get fucked up, I'm like, I don't really know about that. And he doesn't get easily out-wrestled and out-grappled by people either. I don't think he's ever been submitted in the UFC, if my memory serves. I'm double-checking that.
No, just one time regionally, I think.
It says one time he got submitted by Dennis Hallman in his UFC, in his 3rd fight in the UFC in 2011. He got submitted by Dennis Hallman. So, yeah, this guy is literally fucking about that life, John Makdessi fought Anthony fucking Njokuani in 2012. Like, this guy has been a fighter forever. And the one thing is, man, John Makdessi hasn't knocked anybody out since 2015. But sometimes it's not just about can you knock people out? It's can your opponent get knocked out? Nobody was talking about Naimov, the power punching Tajikistan guy. They were talking about his wrestling and this and that. And he was getting out wrestled by Jamie Malarkey. He stood up, he turned around, he punched him in the face, and Jamie Malarkey went to sleep. So I'm just like, Jamie Malarkey at minus 250, it's not for me, boys. What do you think, Rich?
Yeah, me and you chatted about this one, and yeah, went back and forth. I don't know. Malarkey, he is an overachiever. You know, when he's a favorite, he fucks it up. When he's a dog, he's beating the likes of fucking Deontay Smith and Karma Worthy. I think this one goes over, to be honest. I think he's going to try and hide that chin. He's coming off a loss. He needs to keep his job. He's going to be scared. He's going to be timid. I think he's going to push the grappling, make it a boring fight. This is like a smoke break fight. Go make yourself some nachos or something. Yeah, Makadesi, 38, like you said, hasn't KO'd since 2015. He has been with Fight Ready for a minute, so they're going to have a good game plan for him, which is probably going to consist of, you know, running around the ring, keeping on his toes, you know, hitting and running, which could win, man. But I do think Malarkey will get some top time. But saying all this, I'm giving Malarkey too much credit, man. We know what the game plan should be, but we know often or not they don't implement it. So maybe I'm giving him too much credit. But Malarkey should win this with some grappling, man, and edge out the decision. It's whether he's smart enough. But I'm staying away completely, man.
Yeah, and for me, you know, I might look at the prop market here. I've told you before, I've been burned multiple times on Malarkey by sub, and then I started to dig on this one, and you've got a guy in McDessie who is a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu who has been putting in time on the mats for like 10 plus years. I'm like, this is probably not a guy Malarkey easily submits. Malarkey, he doesn't force the issue, right? He doesn't give a fuck if he submits anybody or not in his entire UFC career. He's very lackadaisical, and that for me is the biggest problem. Guys that break against Jamie Malarkey, he will always beat, because he just continues to press forward, come into your face, throw shots. He's never backing down from a challenge. But guys with real physicality, guys that can throw punches hard, things like that, they can just knock this dude the hell out. Like in fights where he's winning or losing, but he's taken so much cumulative damage for a young guy that I'm like, who's fresher at this point in their career? Like, fucking toss up to me, you know? Like Jamie Malarkey, slightly more fresh, you know? I'd put him at a minus 185 maybe here. But minus 250, that's just wild to me.
It's funny, bro. I'm checking my notes, and that's what I've got as well. Lacks the heart and desire. He lacks the desire now. The fire's gone. And you see that in his performances against like Prado. He took him down in round 1. That was an easy path to victory. Then round 2 or 3, he was happy to just like stand and strike with him. Like you said, lackadaisical. Yeah, and that name of KO, that was more Malarkey being an idiot. Like the writing was on the wall before it happened. He was rinsing and repeating the same shot. And then Malarkey was just an idiot, and just it was there, man. So, yeah, if you're parlaying him, it's risky as fuck, man. Probably just stay away from this fight. Too many unknowns, man.
I would tend to agree. Next up, let's see what we've got here. We've got Jack Jenkins taking on Chepe Mariscal. And I know you got fired up opinions about this one, so I'll kick it right to you, brother.
Yeah, I have been tarnishing Jenkins. I do think he's a one-trick pony with the calf kicks. I was disappointed in Emmers that he didn't push the wrestling until round 3. If he had have implemented it earlier, he would have easily got a win. Probably would have finished him on the mat. To me, Jenkins doesn't do much of anything well, man. And I know he's a fish off his back. I've seen it on the regionals. I've seen it in the Emmers fight. Like I said, that one was frustrating as hell. Chepe in this one, I think he's plus 550 ITD, man, which I think is wild. Because if he implements the right game plan, puts on the pressure, puts Jack on his back foot, and, you know, adds in some wrestling, some grappling, he could definitely get a TKO from Mount, or a submission. I think Jenkins is a fraud. The fights that he's had are ridiculous. Dana White's Contender series, he fought Linares, who's a bum. Go check out his record. 0-1 fighters, 0-2 fighters. He was just a body in there. And I think ever since that fight, Jenkins is just hyped off the fact that I think he broke the guy's leg, or almost did. You know, that was the one that like highlighted the leg kicks from Jenkins. And I think he's just been riding that wave. He tried it on Don Shanice, who's a he's a bit stiff. He's a regional fighter, not very athletic, and he posed problems to Jenkins, got some top control on him, And I don't like the look in in Jack's eyes when he's on bottom, man, and he's got people on top of him. It's not a good look at all. He's not doing anything technical to get back to his feet. In round 3 against Emmers, he was pretty much done, man, but just ran out of time. Yeah, and on the Chepe fight, I think people are going to be disparaging of him. They're going to say, oh, it was Trevor Peake. That's the only reason he got the win. Now he's fighting somebody somebody good. Maybe that's what's driving the line. But I think the line's crazy. It was like plus 180 at one point. This is definitely a dog or pass situation. And as I was talking about with the Aussie fighters, there are some expendable ones and there are some that are not. And for me, Jack falls in the expendable category. Chepe, he's got a wealth of experience, far better people he's been fighting, whether he's won or lose those fights. They're better than anyone Jack's fought on the regional scenes in fucking Hex and Eternal or whatever it's called. Chepe's for Steve Garcia from the UFC, you all know, Brito, Zalal, Sabatini, who he beat. He beat Zalal as well, man. Bryce Mitchell, he lost to back in the day. So he's got a wealth of experience, and I think he's learned from that. He's only 30 years old. That's not, he's got a couple of years left in him. He got to Australia 10 days early to do the weight cut. He's back at 145. Obviously, he took his debut at 155 and even won against Peake. And you can say what you want about Peake. He's dangerous as fuck in the first round. Chepe pretty much schooled him. He was bigger than Chepe. That was noticeable. So I'm all about Chepe, man. It's a dog or pass situation. That was long, man.
I've gone all over the place on this fight. It started for me as a Chepe dog or pass situation. And now I'm just at the point where I don't fucking know what to make of this fight. Because on the one hand, the things I like to think about are recent activity, right? This guy Chepe, here's like my concerns about Chepe, let's say. Because at first I was very bullish. But number one, he's coming down to 145, natural weight class for him. But he was at 155 last time, was in a war, and that was 3 months ago. Now he's coming back down after a 15-minute tough fight. He did another fight earlier this year. So this is his third fight of the year. His third fight, I think, in 6 months. And it's not like they've all been easy, just get in, get out, quick finishes. It's like he's going to war in these fights. So I think he might have a little bit of damage coming into this fight. But he is fighting a guy in Farjak who was getting taken down last time out. I wonder how much of that is Jamal Emmers and his wrestling background, his awkward length. He's a big guy. These guys are going to be at size parity. Chepe and Jack, they're about the same size. I have my anthropomorphic advantages cheat sheet here, and Mariscal is going to have a 1-inch reach advantage, height parity at 5'7", virtual age parity at 30 years of age. So there's a lot that's very similar about these guys. So then I asked myself, what's the factors that could distinguish them? Number one, we got an Australian in Aussie, right? I think he could be one of these guys that the UFC tries to promote as a younger star, but he is 30. He's not a spring chicken by any means. I just think of this fight as a fight where I'm like, do I want to get involved? I suppose it is a dog or pass situation because I don't want to lay minus 200 here on a guy who doesn't have that much experience. His best wins in the UFC, a split decision that most people thought he didn't deserve against Jamal Emmers, and then the win over Don Shainis. His finishing ability is not translating at the UFC level, which is something else that concerns me, right? Because against a guy like Chepe, I think the way to take him out here is to knock him out, right? He's been knocked out before. He's been hurt before. He's been clipped, let's say. And even if it's early stoppages, I know the things people are going to say, fair enough. But it's like, that's the way I think Jack could get him. He's coming down to 145. He could clip him, buzz him, or hit him with those low kicks. Like you said, he actually has done a lot of damage with those. He's done that in a number of fights. But it didn't translate when he tried to do it to Don Shainis, who prepared for that fight for 2 weeks? I think that was a short notice fight as well when that got put together. So overall, this is just a fight where I keep going back and forth in my head. So I don't want to, force a play. I'm probably going to just stay away from this fight. But I wish you best of luck on the dog shot. And what do we know about a guy like Chepe? You got to fight hard for your money. He's not a quitter, right? He might get knocked out. If he dies, he dies. But he's not a guy that's going to quit on you, in my opinion. Yeah,
that's he's got the dog in him, man. He's going to bring it to Chepe. I think he's from a good camp as well. I forget where he's from. Elevation Fight Team.
Yeah. That's why his cardio checks out too.
Yeah, for sure, man. But yeah, say less, man. It's all good.
Love it. All right, brother. On to the next one. We've got Carlos Ulberg taking on Daun Jung in the featured prelim of the evening. And you started us off on the last one, so I'll get us started here. I think Carlos Ulberg's going to win this fight. I don't think I'm breaking news there. He is a favorite here, about a -230, -250. I forget what the best available price. About a -250 best available right now. And when I look at a fight like this, I just say to myself, why is the UFC putting it together, right? Dawoon Jung's on a 2-fight losing streak. He lost to 2 different style archetypes. This is something else I bring up at times. The UFC will test you against different kind of fighters. See, hey, maybe it's just this style that he's losing to. But that's not the case with Dawoon Jung. He goes out there against a complete wrestler, right? Like a guy who is basically wrestler bust in Devin Clark, and he gets beat in that one. Then a pure kickboxer, stand-up fighter in Dustin Jacoby. He gets iced in the first round there. So I think that the UFC is kind of looking at that and saying, okay, he's been around for a little while. He's gotten some wins under his belt, but when we start to test him against these upper echelon guys, maybe he doesn't have it. Maybe he's not there athletically. The Sam Alvey fight, another indication that could be a problem. And I think that you look at a guy like Carlos Ulberg on the other side. He is 32, right? I do think of that as a little bit old, but it's light heavyweight, right? So he's got a little bit more wiggle room. He's got a little bit more time, and he looks like one of the best athletes in the division, right? He's fast, he's mobile, he's athletic, he hits hard. And when you look at the guys that he's knocking out, the Nego Mariano is a much more durable fighter, in my opinion, than somebody like Dawoon Jung. So I feel like this is a fight where he's got the power to hurt him. And he's also shown in that Fabio Charant fight that was terrible, right? Puts you to sleep, but it's also just an easy win. He didn't overcomplicate it. He used his physical advantages. I think he even got top position at one point in that fight. Fabio Charant, even though he's a decent enough guy, with probably better skills on the mat, the athleticism gap was so significant he could do nothing. He was just stuck. And we've seen that before. Anton Turkalj, right? I thought he was a better grappler than Vitor Petrino before the fight, but what happened? The physicality meant I can't do a damn thing. Every time I try and do something, he does physical hoss things to me and I fall over. Like, that's kind of what I feel like here. Carlos Ulberg could probably use his physicality to save him if he gets in any awkward clinches or situations. And I haven't loved the wrestling that I've seen from Dawoon Jung. He took down William Knight. Guys, no disrespect. There's guys from my gym that can take down William Knight. Like just local guys, like just guys. There's a 145-pounder I would put money on to take down William Knight, right? Like in my gym. So I'm just like, I don't know about all this. I look at this on paper and I say, Dawoon Jung, unless he gets a submission here, I feel like he's swimming up Schitt's Creek without a paddle. What do you think, Rich?
Yeah, you're dead right, man. He's not going to lose this fight. Ulberg, too pretty. He's the one who brings the women in for the cards, man. And what I really like about him is his distance management, his range, his patience on the feet. He's a really technical striker. But I tell you how you want to attack this one, and I'm betting it myself. You want the late KO props, man, because he's not going to get Jung out of there in round 1. It's going to be 2 or 3. It's going to be accumulation of leg kicks. Jung isn't going to like it. And on the Jung side, man, he doesn't move his legs. He doesn't move his feet. He's just plodding along, looking for big shots. He's lucky that Kennedy was just a big stiff idiot and stood in front of him and just, was happy to trade, pot shots. You hit me, I hit you. And Jung had the harder shot, man. But Ulberg ain't going to do that. He's going to keep it at range. He's going to implement the leg kicks. He's going to piece him up. But he is low volume. That's why I like the over 1.5. I think it's going to be like a late round 2, round 3 finish. I'm just hoping I don't get burnt and it goes all the way to decision. But I do think after a while, these leg kicks, calf kicks will get to Jung. And if I could bet a calf kick finish, I probably would, man. But yeah.
And I bet Dawoon Jung at plus money against Dustin Jacoby, right? I thought that was a very winnable fight for him because I'm like, man, this guy's going to go out there and mix in his wrestling and his grappling against a guy who's pretty, one note with the kickboxing. And what does he do? He goes out there and tries to trade with Dustin Jacoby. It's like, that's an IQ test and you failed, my brother. And then he goes out there in the subsequent fight, right? Guys, Devin Clark is just not that impressive a physical athlete for this level, right? He's fine as just like a guy, right? And he is a functional UFC fighter. That's the extent of it. He really has never gone past that. And you're losing to that guy, that for me was a mark of demerit, right? And now you're looking at a guy who the UFC would really like to do well. When I think people forget the story, but when he came in, they asked him, who do you want to fight? And he was like, Kennedy and Nzechukwu, and then he beat the tar out of Kennedy and Nzechukwu, gassed out and died. But like, outside of that, he's looked like aces since he got to the UFC. And Dawoon Jung, on the other hand, guys, listen, I liked him on the way up, but let's go back and contextualize his record for real. Khadisi Bragimov, only good on the Russian regional scene when he's on full sauce. When he came to the UFC, he couldn't buy a win. Mike Rodriguez, not a good fighter at the UFC level, lost almost every fight that he had in the UFC. Stan Alvey couldn't buy a win in the UFC on his way out, went to a split draw with this guy. William Knight, I don't know if he's still with the promotion. His last fight, I don't think he attempted a significant strike in the UFC. Not a good UFC fighter. Kennedy Nzechukwu, same guy that we were just discussing, right? He's kind of up and down, but mostly just a banger in the middle. Starting to come along a little bit now that he's been working with Saif Saud and Fortis MMA for a while. But overall, that's just not the resume where you're like, oh my God, this guy is the next coming. And I feel like Carlos Ulberg on the other side, it's not like it's that much better, but I rate a Nikolai Negumereanu as a guy who's like on the outside of the top 25 looking in. Tafan Chukwi, I think of as a guy who's probably better than all those other guys. I think he has a win over slow Mike Rodriguez, for example. So all these things put together, man, I just think it's pretty clear. Carlos Ulberg, a little bit higher pedigree, a little bit better situationally, and I think he's going to get the win in the finish here.
Yeah, Sam Alvey was the worst, bro. He's like plus 400. I bet him, and I got fucked over. So that one still stings, man. Fuck you, Sam.
Oh, that's brutal. Yeah, I had Sam Alvey in a couple of those fights at the end when things didn't go so good. But I think it was like the Ryan Spann fight. He gave you an honest chance in a few of those fights, but it always went to a draw, the son of a bitch. Next up, we got Tyson Pedro and Anton Turkalj kicking off the main card. And Rich, I know there's another one you feel pretty bullish about, my brother. So why don't you let the people have it?
Yeah, I think the Pleasure Man is a fraud. To be honest, if you go and check his regional fights before we get into the UFC, they're literally against 40-year-olds, 44-year-olds, 0-1s, 0-2, just literal cans, man. And then you look at his UFC performances, very underwhelming. Most recently, the Petrino one, getting reversed, having a body triangle on Petrino and Petrino being able to just turn into you. That was just lame. There's another situation where, again, he didn't have the body triangle, but he turned into him. And Petrino was there to be finished, man. He ran 2 or 3, and he just didn't push the gas on him. He wasn't technical enough to outdo him. And now all of a sudden, I'm supposed to believe that he's going to beat Tyson Pedro because everyone's putting too much stock into the last performance by Pedro. I do believe his excuse about having some, I can't even remember the name of it, so I'm not going to try and remember, but he had some illness that affected his cardio. I'll give him a bit of pass for that. But even if he didn't, he was fighting a decent guy, man, in Modestus. Modestus doesn't just allow you to finish him. He's got decent cardio. He's big for the weight class. He's got some decent striking. And he's not just going to turn over for you, man. And the way I see this one planning out is Pedro's going to sub him, probably round 1. Subs 500. I don't know what sub round 1 is, but when you've got the likes of Pedro on top of you, it's a bit different from Petrino, man. He's going to look for the subs. He's going to land some ground and pound, and I think Anton's going to give him the neck, man. I don't think he's going to like that him on top. I don't think he's going to be able to get back up. I don't think he's got any reversals in him. The only way that Pedro loses this one is by getting, gassed and TKO'd in like round 3. But like I said, I'm not buying the last performance and that like Pedro's just washed now and he's completely shit. I think the line's a gift. And if you're betting the Pleasure Man, I don't know what to tell you, man. It's just, this isn't the one. So that's my thoughts, bro.
Yeah, and this is another one where I feel like plus money is the way here. If you can get plus money on either side in this fight, I don't hate it. Because it's a really volatile matchup. On the one hand, Tyson Pedro has never won a fight that's been outside the first round, right? It's a very common talking point. A lot of people are going to bring that up this week, but I also think it does speak to some of his cardio problems historically. That being said, to your point, I thought the Modestus Bukauskas fight was a slight step in the right direction, especially if you believe him when he says that he was sick for his last fight. And I listened to the interview, it's like 10-minute interview, whatever. Seemed genuine to me. He seemed upset that the fan base didn't respect him for going out there and fighting while sick. He seemed like he was surprised that people, didn't understand that and didn't appreciate it. But I had never heard that before either, right? Like as a consumer, I wasn't told that he's sick, right? I just thought he looked like shit, So with a little bit more context, I'm like, okay, fair enough. You look at him historically, who's got better wins? There's no doubt. there's no doubt that it's Tyson Pedro. He's got better wins, more credible wins in the UFC, but he's also had these start-stop runs. You know, he kind of had that 4-year gap. He had some injuries. He dealt with some stuff outside the cage. He come back. He get some real easy fights from the UFC that tells you they want to see him do well. They'd like to see him succeed. They'd like to put him in a position to do that. His last time out against Modestas Bukauskas, truth be told, I think they would have preferred if Tyson Pedro won the fight, but instead they had a no-lose situation, right? Modestas Bukauskas, nice redemption story arc. Oh my God, out of the UFC, got his knee blown apart by Khalil Roundtree. Now he's back. That's a great story. The other story would have been this guy, Tyson Pedro, he's got a 3-fight win streak after disappearing for a couple of years and whatever. He's training with the city kickboxing crew. He's putting himself around the right people. He said, it feels different to me being surrounded by greatness. It feels different having Eugene Behrman tell me this is what I should be preparing for. This is what I should be working on. And frankly, you talk about a Eugene Behrman and Eric Nixick. We're talking about some of the best coaches in the game today. And so I'm not going to discount that. I'm going to feel like when you look at a guy who's only had one opportunity as an underdog in the UFC, he was plus 135 against Khalil Roundtree. He submitted him in the first round. So again, this is a guy that's done it before. He hasn't had many opportunities. Everybody thinks he's going to win every fight. And now we're finally getting to the point where people don't think he's going to win this one. And I do think that's interesting to me. You know, I think that could present a recency bias opportunity in the market. Anton Turkalj, on the other hand, guys, I'm the one that's been betting him when he's lost, right? So I can't say that I've got this stone cold great read on the guy, but I bet him by sub against Petrino because I'm like, man, this guy is so much better on the ground than Petrino. But what did we see there? The physicality that he lacks. What happened when he fought Ibo Aslan on the Contender Series? Or excuse me, not on the Contender Series. Ibo Aslan from the Contender Series, right? If you guys are watching, following along this year, he got an insane first-round knockout, looks like a beast, like walking the guy down, looks like he's roided out of the fucking ass. He was putting the beatdown of all beatdowns on Turkalj and then gassed out himself and then got finished. It was a fight where like Turkalj stayed tough, absorbed a lot of damage, but he also was getting physically manhandled until the guy gassed out. And that's what always happens to him. He's kind of gangly, long, awkward. He could stay in there and make it tricky. But I also could just envision him getting Kimura in the first round. Like I could envision him getting guillotine choked in the first round here because there's a big physical gap between these two guys. So I think Tyson Pedro is actually the better grappler when they're fresh, which I don't think is the case with Petrino. Petrino, you could see in that fight, guys, he made 50 mistakes in the grappling? Athleticism will bail you out, son. It will get you out of a lot of problems you caused for yourself. And Petrino, I even called his next fight that he would win by sub 3 or decision, right? I learned from my mistakes. I was like, okay, Petrino, he's got that different kind of physicality. Tyson Pedro, historically, he's had the same thing. He knocked out Paul Craig in the first round. It's like this guy can go and he can do the work with real elite light heavyweights that are other athletes. And I don't know that you could say the same about Turkalj, certainly not based on the evidence we've seen so far. So Turkalj's not bad, but he's not great. He's not great at striking. He's not great at wrestling. He's not great at grappling, in my view. I think he's very average everywhere. So for me, I'm kind of leaning towards Pedro here. But if I bet Pedro, I will be sitting there waiting to bail out live if it hits the end of round 1, because I think he's winning the first round here at a pretty decent clip. So give me Tyson Pedro.
And that's why it's going to be the sub, bro. That's why he's going to lose by sub, because he hasn't fought anybody with the decent subs yet. Yeah, I know he had Almeida and he got dealt with as he should have in that one. But that's eye-opening as well. Like, he comes off the Dana White Contender Series, and what did the UFC do to him? They feed him to what's his name? Jayton Almeida.
Jailton.
And then they give him Petrino, a winnable fight. He fucks it up. So the UFC are like, oh, we know what this guy's all about now. We're using to get Pedro a win again. Pedro's opening up the main card in Australia, pay-per-view, people watching. They don't want an L, man. They want to satisfy the crowd. We know that. We've learned that from the fucking France card. Done my due diligence, and I've gone back over the last year at the cards that aren't at the Apex and aren't at Vegas. And it's always favorable for the fighters in the main card when they're the hometown guys, man. And that's the exact same situation. He's getting subbed.
Yeah, I could definitely see it. So for me, things I'd be interested in here: fight ends by sub, the under, the fight not to go to decision. Like all violence all the time is what I'm leaning towards here. But mostly via submission, right? I just think these guys are going to grapple. Right. I think Tyson Pedro has shown he's very willing to go out there and grapple. Turkalj is in awkward grappling matches every fight. So for me, not completely selling my stock on Turkali, right? I kind of thought that he had some decent submission equity when he got to the UFC, but I just think this is the wrong matchup. I want to see him against guys that are other terrible athletes at light heavyweight, where he can go out there and have meme fights that are fun. But I just don't think when they keep putting him against A-level athletes, he's going to have a great chance to shine. So next up, let's take a look at the main card, second bout of the night, which this looks like it could be the opener on a fight night card as well. We got Justin and Tapa taking on Austin Lane, and this is a heavyweight slot banger. The reason it's on here is to get casuals to buy the card and know that one man is probably going to fall in the first round more often than not in fights like these. Two guys that are a little bit awkward, stiff in the heavyweight division. We've seen Tapa go out there and go full, stupidity and just, to be politically correct, you guys know what I mean, but he has literally just gone out there and said, I'm going to swing everything from my hip and hope for the best. And he got put down by a math teacher in the first round. So I think that that's a real factor here. And you look at a guy like Austin Lane, right? The things that have changed about this fight, the things that have made it more difficult for me, bro, I don't like betting on fights that have been rebooked. Just period. Like, I don't like that because we see the bookmakers get an advantage. They know where sharps are coming in. They know what props they bet. They know when in the week they want to bet them, all this stuff. And Tafa's got power, but does he have grappling upside? No. Does he have 10 different paths to win the fight? No. I feel like he's a guy who wins fights by knockout, or he goes to sloppy decisions at heavyweight. And I feel like a guy like Lane, he could definitely get knocked out, dude. I don't love his chin. I don't love his defense. He's kind of stiff and awkward. He's got that football player fighting stance, where he's a little bit like too loosey-goosey almost and too overconfident. But I feel like Lane looks a little bit faster, looks a little bit more mobile overall. And I would be less surprised if he mixed in his wrestling and grappling. I think I took a small position on Lane by sub the last time these guys fought because I'm like, a football player hitting a tackle in an MMA fight against a guy who's built like the world's worst lineman. Yeah, I could definitely see that happening. So for me, I do think that this is a live underdog situation with Austin Lane, but I also want to go through the variables that have changed here. Cause last time I thought he was a live underdog as well, but he was in Jacksonville, former Jacksonville Jaguar, and it's in his backyard. Crowd's going to be going ham for him, right? All this stuff. And now we're in Tafa's backyard. He's got to fly halfway across the world. It just makes it a little bit more difficult, in my view, for him to win this fight. It kind of gives more advantages to Tafa and more time to prepare. So for me, it's a tricky enough fight, but I feel like somebody's getting finished in the first round. And I do feel money line pricing, it's a dog or pass situation. Tafa's burned you before. And he's a guy that's been flatline knocked out in Australia on pay-per-view main cards. So I wouldn't be too bullish on laying the minus 250 here with a guy who's a fairly one-note heavyweight with an amateurish record. What do you think, Rich?
I bet Lane the first time round, and I think I like him again here, man. I'm not too keen on Tafa. He has a huge hole in the wrestling, grappling, obviously. His wins are Parker Porter, Hunsucker, Adams, which isn't great. And I've just got weird vibes about this fight, man. Something just seems a bit off. Lane obviously got the measurables. He's big as fuck, man. 6'6". Big reach. Just something weird about it, man. Like you mentioned, he's got a nice blast double. If he can get on top, man, I've seen him with his hammer fists. He's got that touch of death. Then the other side of it for Lane, he's got like a long layoff. Obviously, he had that fight with Tafa, which lasted all of like a minute. But prior to that, he was off for like 2 years. He had bicep surgery, which I didn't like. But like I said, it's just got a weird vibe about it, man, where I think it's like a dog opportunity. I definitely don't think people should be parlaying Tafa in this position. I'll leave it at that, man. It's just got weird vibes about it, and I don't hate anybody taking the shot on Lane, man.
Yeah, and to your point, we have opposite anthropomorphic advantages here, right? And so I always like to look at anthropomorphic advantages in terms of like frame, like your reach, your size, your height, how you guys are going to match up, but then also your age, because these are two factors that are very predictive in fighting, And when I'm looking at this one, there's a 6-year age gap favoring Tafa, right? He's 29. He's on the right side of 30. That's a good thing. But then you also look on the other side, he's at a 6-inch height and reach disadvantage. So you're like, wow, I can't really use the measurables to get my read here. I got to go a little bit deeper. And for that, I just feel like Austin Lane probably has more paths to victory And when you're saying that, and he's a plus 200 underdog, it's like, man, this feels like a dog or pass situation. It's just contextually, it's harder to get there now than on the previous slate.
Yeah, and I know we only had like, what was it, a minute in the previous fight before the eye poke, but it seemed to me like Lane was trying to employ the like stick and move game plan. He wasn't looking to like plant his feet and stay still to give Taffer a target. So, like I said, if you there are people out there who are going to play Taffer round 1 KO, I'd be very wary of doing that. I do think Lane's going to be on his bike. He's going to frustrate Taffer, and that could be the route to victory, man, for Lane. Put some clinching up against the cage, win a split, some shit like that. So, yeah, they're my thoughts, man.
I love it. Guys, we are moving on to the top 3 fights of the card here. Just want to give a shout out to the chat. First and foremost, our guy, Jake Fagan. Cheers, guys. The hard work and sharp insight you share with us each week is truly a blessing. Dropped a dono there as well. Truly appreciate you, my brother. We will always get to your comments, questions, concerns if you drop a dono in the chat. So shout out to our guy, Jake. Shout out to a longtime consistent viewer of the program. Appreciate you being here. God bless. With that being said, guys, top 3 fights of the night. Let's get it rolling. Last but not least, good call on Gon last week, says Gagnon. I got blinded by that John Jones fight. Absolutely. I think that was a great read by both of us. I regret that I did not get to the betting window with Ciryl Gane because I felt like the read was on point there in hindsight. Got to get just that touch better at pulling the trigger this year. But overall, the read's been pretty solid. So appreciate you guys. And shout out to the sharpest chat in the game. Dixon, our guy, always dropping knowledge in the chat. Appreciate you, brother. And everybody else coming along for the ride. 120 people to break down these last 3 fights. So let's do it. Manel Cap taking on short notice Felipe Dos Santos. Rich, why don't you kick us off, brother? We got a flyweight showcase in the featured bout of the evening.
We do. We have number 7 in the world, Manel Cap, versus number 63 flyweight from Brazil. I'll just keep it short. I like Cape by sub. It's something like 900, 950. Because Dos Santos, he's a shoot box fighter. He's tough as nails, willing to throw down, wants to just, take one to give one on the feet. But he does have susceptible takedown defense, kind of a fish on his back. And I could just see the moment getting too much. It's just before the fucking co-main event on a pay-per-view in Australia, big occasion for him. And I don't know what it is about it, man. I just think the KO for Cape is a bit square. And he does have submissions on his record. I have seen him try and implement them. He has had some tough matchups of late where he can't use any type of grappling. And at the lower weight classes, I always look to target it, man, because they lack power. I'm not saying that Cape does. Obviously, he does have power. But I'm just saying in general, especially in the women's fights, you get the 115ers, 125. I look to target the submissions over the KO because usually the statistics will say that they lack the power. Short notice for Adesanya. What more can you say, man? ITD is probably good in this one. But yeah, I think sub is quite sharp, man, especially at the number.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different props that you could look at on a fight like this. But I also just think, you got to understand what contextually was going on here. Manel Cap being brought in to fight, a guy in Kaikar, France, who's got some notoriety, who's got some appeal, who, by the way, was just in a number 1 contenders fight that was very close with Amir Albazi. So I think that was a fight that they were really trying to, hype up as a great opportunity for a number 1 contender to break out in the flyweight division. Unfortunately, plans don't always go the way that you intend, right? But who was supposed to be here? Manel Cap. And who was not supposed to be here? Felipe Dos Santos. So Felipe Dos Santos is going to be looking to spring an upset in every sense of the word, right? He's breaking onto the UFC roster at a very young age. He's very inexperienced relative to a guy like Manel Cap, who's been having, high-level fights, championship-level fights since he was in Ryzen, right? Since he was getting out-wrestled by guys with wrestling shoes on in a ring somewhere, right? This guy has come a long way. He's training with world-class fighters. He's training at the AKAs. He's training at the Extreme Couture. And I feel like people love Shootbox Diego Lima, and I get it. They're on great supplements. They're doing a lot of things right. They got a lot of killers in the room. But they're not going to make every 22-year-old fighter a perfect out-of-the-box commodity to come to the UFC. This guy, his last 2 fights, he's not putting away regional-level competition. He's going to split decisions. Is that the kind of thing that jumps off the page to you as like, he's going to come in and beat the number 1 guy in the world in Manel Kape, or the number 2 guy, or the number 3 guy, wherever you put him in your personal rankings? Manel Kape is right up there. And by the way, I bet Matheus Nicolau, my asshole was clenched the entire fight. I thought that I was going to lose it. I thought he was going to knock out Matheus Nicolau at various points in that contest, hurt him badly. And we've seen how Nicolau's chin's been exposed a little bit after. So for me, I do look at this kind of fight and I say to myself, Manel Kape being set up for success, being given a guy who's going to give him a fun, stylistic fight, the kind of fight that he wants. Guys, he wants people to get in a fight with him. He wants people to stand there and throw. He wants people who will grapple back and forth. He does not want people that are running away from him all night, where he has to try and track him down, where he's got to try and walk after him. He's not that big a guy. He's going to be smaller than Felipe Dos Santos. But when you look at the skills on paper and the level of maturity and experience, I think Felipe Dos Santos is just a little bit too much too soon. Can he win UFC fights? Absolutely. Will they bring him back to the bottom of the division and give him a lot easier fights after this? Yeah, you betcha. Somebody who's been run through by Tatsuro Taira is getting a call. Hey, bro, we need you to go do the JOB. That's what's going to happen. They're going to find somebody to do the JOB for this guy in his next one, because he's doing the JOB for Manel Kape, in my humble opinion, on Saturday night.
Yeah, it's the same situation as Quinones. You know, he's in the UFC. You know, just take your L. The UFC will do you a favor in your next fight and give you a winnable matchup. He's too slow and plodding in his movement. Like you said, on the regional circuit, he was going to decision with bums. He was getting taken down. Really bad takedown defense, man. If I'm Kape's manager or coach, I'm telling him, man, you know, take this kid down. And even if he doesn't implement the wrestling, man, it could be a club and sub situation. So you've got to at least put, you know, stick $10 on fucking Kape by sub.
I don't mind that shot at all. And also, guys, like if Kape was to get upset in this fight, I feel like it's probably a submission on the other end. When you look, he's not a guy that's got a suspect chin, in my view. I think he's tough. I think he's durable. But I do think that there's been a couple times where he's willing to scramble, willing to get in these exchanges, and then somebody pops out on his back. It happened to him in Ryzen, and he got submitted via rear naked choke. So when you're looking at, you know, the sub prop, I think it's like plus 950 for Manel Kape. You're looking at ends by sub at like plus 550 and plus 600. I wouldn't mind splitting my stake between those two as well, just in case, because I feel like both of these guys will, you know, willingly engage in the grappling. And I do think that they both have a danger factor, but I favor Manel Kape to be a little faster, a little bit more clever and creative. And also, I think his club and sub is much more likely, which is why I think there's value on his submission prop. But in any case, we can move along to the co-main event of the evening. Rich, this is a banger. We've got Tai Tuivasa taking on Alexander Volkov, Drago. And I've had real success betting on both these guys, man. And I like them both. They're fun guys. I feel like I've rated them both. You know, in fact, I'm going to pull it up as I let you kick us off here. But I actually have a breakdown where I did a heavyweight power ranking, and both of these guys were ranked right next to each other. So I'm curious to see who I actually put on top of the other. What do you think about this matchup, Rich?
Well, we've been going back and forth on it in the DMs, man, and I think we finally landed on a side. There's a lot to consider, man. And yeah, we got Tai coming off 2 losses to Gane and Pavlovich. No hate on them. Obviously, they could both be champions in the future, so no hate there. And Volkov's coming off 2 wins against Romanov in his last fight by TKO, which I took, and then Rosenstruck the fight before that. And I can kind of trash them 2 wins for Volkov, man. Like Rosenstruck, I think that he's kind of had his day in the UFC. You know, he peaked. He got that fight with Overeem, and that was kind of like the fight to decide where he goes from there. He won that fight, didn't he? Maybe it was the fight after that. I'm getting my notes mixed up. But my point is, I think Rosenstruck, he's peaked. You know, he's made a shitload of money, and then the performances of late, he's kind of like really digressed in them. He shouldn't be losing to Volkov, in my opinion. Like, he's got strong stand-up, but he never fixed that gap in the grappling. That was always his Achilles heel. And then Romanov, you know, he just come in really fat in that fight. Didn't like him on the scales. Didn't think he could take Volkov down. So he got the W. And I just think that Tai's going to win, man. But like I was saying to you, I think we should be hesitant playing the KO. It does look really enticing. It's around about plus 300. I think there's a world here where Tai wins by decision. It's plus 1,000. And the reason for saying that is Volkov is quite durable. I think he's only got one KO loss in the UFC. There are some things I don't like about him. You know, getting subbed by Aspinall wasn't a good look. I know that's not to take anything away from Aspinall. I know he's good. I know he's got good jiu-jitsu. But it was just the way it happened, the way it was like a quick tap. That didn't look good. But I think it's going to be some clinching in this one, some back and forth shit. You know, Ty will try and land some bombs, but Volkov, you know, he's got the height. It's going to be hard to connect on him. And yeah, I can see it going the distance, man. I like the overs in the fight, over 1.5. And ultimately, I think Ty gets the win here. I think he's got the brighter future within the UFC. Like I was saying earlier, you know, the UFC, they've got their main guys, Izzy, Ty, Allberg, Pedro. And out of all them, Ty's probably the biggest one, man. I didn't even realize it. I've seen embedded. He's driving around in fucking Lamborghinis. He's got 1 million Instagram followers almost. Like, he's the most known guy. Look at the fun everyone has with the fucking shoeies. You know, it's something they can promote. He's a fan favorite. And that's really important to the UFC, I think. Whereas Volkov, I know he's got 2 wins, but they were favorable matchups. Like I said, it was more about the opponents like being shit, kind of dying off. I noticed it against Tybura. I bet Volkov versus Tybura at something like -250. And halfway through the fight, I was like, no way is he going to let me down in this spot, man, laying chalk on him, because I rarely do chalk. And he just looked shit against Tybura, just flat. Didn't like what I was seeing. You know, Ty's going to be up for this one in his home crowd. I don't think he's getting knocked out by Volkov at all. If anyone's getting the KO, it's going to be Ty. But like I said, I'd just be wary on that because I do think it could go to decision. And why not just take the money line? What is he, plus 200? Why be greedy, man? But yeah, they're my thoughts, bro. What do you reckon?
Yeah, man, we see this one pretty similar. And like I said, we've hashed this one out a bit in the DMs, but when you look at this fight overall, I've had success with both guys, right? And when you've seen Tai Tuivasa, cash as an underdog, it was in this exact same price range, you know, plus 170 against Derek Lewis. I bet 5 units there. And you know me, I'm a pretty conservative guy most of the time in terms of my unit allocation, but I thought to myself, there is 0% chance this is worse than a coin flip. So I'm like, at plus 170, you're giving me a coin flip. I mean, I have to take that, right? And the thing that I pointed out in that fight is that I know for sure Tai Tuivasa can take a shot. You know, he's been hurt and still knocked out Greg Hardy. He's been rocked and still come back to get the win, right? He's not a guy you could easily put away. There's been guys that have put him out. You know, he's willing to take shots. He can be put down, but he's going to take a lot of damage along the way. And if he can stay up, he's going to stay up and keep throwing back. He got his face broken last time by Sergey Pavlovich, right? Like, nothing you can do about that. You're going to go down when that happens, right? He got beat up by Ciryl Gane in a fight that was a hellacious war, went back and forth. I bet him as an underdog there, right? He's plus 420, Rich. And I know that everybody with a -600 on Gane was doing one of those when he got dropped and sitting back against the fence, right? So I feel like you look at a guy on paper like Tai Tuivasa, and you could say to yourself, you know, is he the most serious looking guy? No. Does he have the best physique? No. But is he a guy that has shown improvement from when he got to the UFC till today? Yeah, I think a lot of improvement. When he was first here, guys, he was a complete fish on the mat. Sergey Spivak ran him for his paper like he was a complete nobody. Now he actually has a functional enough ground game. It's not good, but it's not bad, right? It's a part of his game where he got taken down by Derek Lewis and nobody lived to talk about it, right? It wasn't a part of the story of the fight. He was able to deal with that fact. So I feel like Tai Tuivasa has made some improvements. And on the feet, guys, he does fit the mold of people that can beat Volkov. Volkov's hard to beat, but he's gone against grapplers. He's gone against guys that have 1 round of cardio, like Walt Harris. He's gone against some of these guys, and he's picked them off, right? I bet many times on Volkov. But against Ciryl Gane, a guy that can keep his stuff on the outside, he got outpointed there, right? And Ciryl Gane, if you don't force the issue, he won't force the issue. He was willing to just leg kick and whatever. You know who forces the issue? Tai Tuivasa. He will normally force the issue such that he will get knocked out or he will win. And I feel like he's going to force the issue here against a guy like Volkov. I don't think Volkov likes getting hit, guys. I don't think he ever has. I don't think that because he's been able to avoid getting hit a lot, it doesn't mean that he reacts well when hit. He beat Derek Lewis pillar to post. He was the much better fighter. And you know what happened? He got knocked the hell out because it doesn't matter when you can't take the punches coming back. And I do not think he could take the punches coming back. He's had 46 professional fights, guys. He's not a spring chicken. He's 34 years of age. Ty is 4 years younger. He's going to be at a height and reach disadvantage. No doubt about that. 5 inches of both for Volkov. So Volkov's a big guy. But he's gone out there and he beats tiny Rosenstrike, right? He goes out there and he beats fat Romanov. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful. That's Romanov compared to Romanov. That's Romanov. You look at one picture. I posted them. Why did he go as Jake Collier for Halloween to his last fight? I don't know. But that's what he did. He showed up as Jake Collier. He ate the previous Alexander Romanov. So that fight, I bet Volkov, and my only regret was it wasn't 10 units because the other guy wasn't there to fight. He was literally there for a paycheck. So now you look at this. Tai Tuivasa, I don't think he's just there for a paycheck. I just don't. He's 30 years of age. This is his career. He took some time off. He got knocked out twice in a row in 3 months. By the way, guys, what would happen if you ran out Alexander Volkov against those guys? He'd probably have a tough time. We just saw what happened when he went in against Aspinall. Guys, Aspinall via straight armbar in the first round, that's embarrassing. That shouldn't happen. You get beat, no problem. You get submitted, okay. You get straight armbarred in the first round as a BJJ brown belt? Come on, brother. Come on, brother. That's not good. So I just look at that and I say, where is Volkov's motivation? He's a father. He's had 46 professional fights. He's got a woman at home. Does he really give a shit about this fighting stuff anymore? Does he think he's going to be a world champion? Every time he gets close to the precipice, now he's looking around and he's going, all right, Gane, I lost to that guy. He's at the top. Aspinall, he hasn't even gotten his shot at the top yet, and he just embarrassed me in the first round. Where is his path back to the title? Tai Tuivasa, guys, is entertaining. You put one guy in there with Ciryl Gane, it's a boring 5-round snooze fest. You know, that maybe the hardcores enjoyed, but everybody else turned off in the second round. They're like, oh, Gane's going to whoop his ass. All right, cool enough. Shut off the TV. What about Tai Tuivasa? He goes out there, puts on an instant classic. Both guys get dropped. It's a banger. He's 30. They could still build around this guy. He's one of the biggest stars on the card. He's plus 200. Dogger pass for me. I think Volkov's getting knocked the fuck out. But I also think, to your point, Rich, the whole thing is, if this goes to a decision, we got the Australian crowd. We got Volkov, who, by the way, went to a fucking decision with Greg Hardy, of all people. Everybody else has finished Greg Hardy except for Alexander Volkov. He jabs him in Moscow for a 30-27. Boring. No one wants to watch that, okay? No one. Not even the people in Moscow were like, bro, could you send Tai Tuivasa and we'll do some shoeies or something? Like, I feel like this is just, the UFC is like, please, 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 Tai, look at me in my eyes. Get rid of Alexander Volkov from the top 5. And he's like, sir, yes, sir.
Yeah, and another thing to mention while you're saying that is the losses to Gane and the losses to Pavlovich. They were on the way up, man. When them fights happened, you know, they had the fire, the desire to like win and get title shots, especially Pavlovich on the run he's on. And yeah, to your point, man, Volkov's like kind of done it all, been at the peak, dropped off again, and like you say, 34 now. Had 2 easy fights, 2 favorable matchups in his last 2 bouts. So, yeah, we're seeing it the same, man.
Love it. Last but not least, Stylebender, Israel Adesanya, is taking on Sean Strickland, Psycho Sean, as I like to call him. And I think that this is a fun enough fight on paper. You know, obviously very wide odds here, Rich. And I do think it's a touch wide from a money line perspective. You know, like, do I favor Adesanya? Yes. Do I favor him to minus 500? Sure. Like -7 and all the, I don't know. Even still, like saying minus 500, I don't even feel like I believe that. Like minus 400, I think like he should win this fight. He's a better fighter. He's got better skills. He's a little bit better athlete as well. He's 34 years of age. You know, he's not the younger fighter here. He's got a guy with very similar experience. By the way, I talked to you before about, I have systems that I kind of look at as like a barometer. I don't play every system every time, but I do look for things that fit certain criteria. And Sean Strickland does fit an underdog criteria for me, which is a younger fighter with more professional experience. He's plus 500. He's had more professional fights. He's had more fights at the UFC level. I'm just like, those are some hard things to ignore. But then you look at the stylistic matchup, his defense to head strikes from kicks especially is where he's been caught, where he's been knocked out. We talked about before, John McDessie gets knocked out by kicks, and Jamie Malarkey doesn't fucking kick a damn thing. That's not the case here. He's one of the best kickers that there's been in the sport. So that's definitely a concern for me coming in on the Strickland side. He could get knocked the hell out. However, he had some humility, brought in an Alex Pereira, right? Done a camp with Eric Nixick as his head coach, listening to Eric, doing the training with the wrestling, the jiu-jitsu. That for me, seems like the right ideas if you're going to go against Israel Adesanya. I feel like Strickland going out there to just try and keep it on the feet, that's a recipe for disaster. That's a recipe for eventually getting knocked out. Whereas I think that if he tries to pressure really hard, go for takedowns, that's giving himself the best chance to win. Does he win? I don't know, but that at least puts him in a position to do so. Some of the things that stood out to me, this is a fight to end by sub that's over 10-1, when I think Sean Strickland's best chance to win this fight inside the distance is to take Izzy to the ground and try and submit him. Israel Adesanya, if you listen to his own words, says, I want to show off the fact that I've been working with Craig Jones and I've got something special for him. By the way, separate aside, I listen to Craig Jones' podcast, right? I'm a jiu-jitsu guy. I like listening to that. He's talked about in the past. He's like, I've been surprised by the level of some of these UFC guys. He's like, going with an Izzy, he's not just a guy who can grapple for MMA. He's like, he's very good. He can roll really well. He's smooth with his techniques. And he said the same thing about Volk. He's like, Volk is a machine. Like, the things I've seen him do in the training room is unlike a lot of jiu-jitsu guys. So he had a lot of really complimentary things to say about the CKB guys when he wasn't talking about Izzy fighting. When he was just like talking about his experience with MMA fighters. And he said, like, some MMA fighters, you start rolling with them and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's why you do MMA, brother. Jiu-jitsu wouldn't be good for you. But I did find that interesting. Craig Jones is the right guy to work with. You saw in that Islam Makhachev fight, look at the advancements that Volkanovski was able to make in the wrestling and the grappling. Technically, what he was able to do to advance positions in that fight, to not get finished by one of the best grapplers in the division, a division up. I'm like, this guy, Craig Jones, is a good game planner. He works with these guys individually as well. So all those things considered, I feel like there's some submission equity in this fight that's being underlooked, right? You see 2 fights ago, Alex was getting fucking takedowns on Izzy. Alex Pereira, the kickboxer, took this fucking guy down. Like, is it 0% that Sean takes him down? No. Who has the most takedowns out of anybody on this card? Sean Strickland with 18 UFC takedowns. He's been around a long time. His first UFC win in the middleweight division was by submission all the way back in the day against Bubba McDaniel. So all of these things to say, I'm not going to be laying minus 700. You know me. That's just not my style. I never do shit like that. But I also feel like I could be talked into Sean Strickland above plus 500 for a very small bet from a money line standpoint long term, because title fights at 185 pounds, they normally introduce more variance than that. I just don't think it's going to come through here. I feel like Izzy, too dangerous, probably going to get his beat on Sean Strickland in the early going. Everybody's talking about, round 3 or 4 knockout. Sean just doesn't tend to have fights like that. He either gets cleaned up early or, he has fights where they're very competitive. They go to decision. I feel like he's one of these guys that you catch him on the chin early, you can put him down. But I feel like if you don't catch him in those first 2 rounds, Sean's a guy that kind of gets more comfortable out there, gets used to it. It's like a sparring session. He does that shit every day. I feel like then it's going to be much harder to put him away, and it's going to be more of that touch, go type of fight. So for me, I feel like Izzy probably knocks him out in the second round here. I do feel like there's a chance that he submits him, club and sub, that Sean trying to work in for a fucking takedown gets guillotined or triangle choke. But I don't think it's that high percentage. I feel like more often than not, Adesanya is just too dangerous with his strikes. Sean Strickland's a little bit too reactive with his defense. He's reaching out a lot, and that's how you can get caught with a big kick. So I feel like he's probably getting head kicked here. What do you think, Rich?
Yeah, I'd say Sean hasn't got a shot in hell in winning the belt of beating Izzy on Saturday. No chance. I can understand the numbers enticing, and I understand like the things you're saying. But I don't think Sean's going to grapple one bit. I don't think he can. I think that when he had that motorcycle accident before the Marshman fight, I think that fucked him up to the point where he can't grapple. I don't think he's got the suppleness or whatever you want to call it. I think he's still compromised from that. And I think that's why we don't see him grappling like at all. I think he's competent enough to spar on the feet, throw hands still. But in terms of like dexterity and like I say, suppleness to grapple, I don't think he wants anything to do with that with anybody. Like he didn't do it with Alex Pereira. He wants to use the excuse, I'm a man. I'd rather stand. I ain't fucking doing that. I can beat these kickboxers. They're nothing and the rest of it. But I think it's all like theatrics. I don't think he can grapple, to be honest. So I don't think the sub's there. I think that's also bullshit from Izzy, just talking some noise. But I do think he's got some decent jiu-jitsu. I've seen him do some stuff. Pull up a triangle against Calvin Gastelum. That was pretty slick. I remember that. But yeah, I don't think this is the time. And I also think Izzy's time's coming to an end, man. I expect by the end of next year, he won't be the champion in the middleweight division. It's going to be Kazmat. He's going to fight Izzy and end up beating him and have the belt. They seem to be pushing Izzy a lot recently. He's had a fight like every 3-4 months. They're always trying to find him opponents because the middleweight division's a bit weak. So, you know, he fights Paulo Costa, beats him. They do the Pereira
He was
narrative.
minus 170 there.
Oh, wow.
Against
That was
Paulo.
a steal.
I bet him there.
Yeah. Did you? I think I had him as well, man. Yeah, what was I saying? Who else did they give him? Pereira. They built up that narrative to give him an opponent. Now they've done the Strickland thing to give him an opponent. Strickland's already talking like he's lost, man. He's just made a bag with this fight. Probably got about 800K. You know, buy himself some more wife beaters with that. He's very happy. I expect it's going to be an Izzy KO in round 3 or 4 because round 1, you know, Izzy's going to get going, takes his time to get into the fight. It's going to be an accumulation of leg kicks. He's going to implement them. I don't think Sean's even going to touch him. I think he's just going to box in there and not be able to find his range. Izzy's just going to play with him. And I don't think he's going to quit, Sean. You know, he's too proud for that. But I do think that, you know, it's like the Garn fight last week against Spivak. Spivak was just a fish out of water on the feet. And when he couldn't get his takedowns, he quit in round 2. Cash that shit. But in this one, I think it's more like, you know, Sean's got the heart. You know, he wants to win. He wants to beat Izzy. He's not going to just like crumble, but it's going to be the leg kicks. He's going to let his guard down. He's got that shit defense that he does. You know, he's a bit square on with his hands. They're quite low. And like you said, man, I can see a head kick, some meme shit that puts him down. And then Izzy goes in for like, you know, the ground and pound and the ref waves it off. But yeah, I like round 3, man. I'm really feeling that, but I'd sprinkle round 4 just in case.
All right, so there you go. Round 2, 3, or 4, if you trust the two of us. But that's kind of how I'm seeing it. Very similar, my man. Like I think I talk about things in the long term, and then I talk about things in the short term. Right? In the long term, you're not making money betting minus 700s in UFC title fights. It's not a long term strategy. Same thing with like middleweight fights overall. These guys are half, you know, moronic. Almost all of them, like two a number. You know. You look at these guys, you think, all right, this is what they should do. They go out there and do the opposite, to the point that some people made about Sean Strickland against Pereira. Maybe he couldn't, but also maybe he just didn't. And half the time we see that at middleweight. So that's what I mean in the long term. But then the short term is Israel Adesanya is the biggest star on the card. He's arguably the biggest star in the UFC. He's top 3, certainly among people that actually get in there and fight, right? I love Conor McGregor as much as the next guy. He's not an active fighter, right? A very active fighter is Israel Adesanya. Even when he lost the belt, got right back in there with Alex. So I do think he does better business. He's better for the company. Sean Strickland's a little too edgy, a little bit too on the nose, right, for a fighter. So I feel like more often than not, they could easily repackage Sean. By the way, Sean could fight for a vacant title in the future. Izzy could move up to 205 pounds. He can follow Pereira. But is this the way to end the Israel Adesanya story at 185 pounds? I don't see it that way. I agree with you. Somebody like Khamzat would be a more logical challenge to actually take the belt from him. But I do think this should be fun. It should be action-based. Sean Strickland, he's normally not afraid to fight anybody, for better or worse. And, you know, he's got 2 losses by knockout in the UFC. Wouldn't it be something if we found that third one on Saturday night? So there you have it, guys.
You know what UFC. Be?
Yo, please go ahead.
So you know what it's going to be? It's going to be UFC 300. That's when Izzy's going to fight Chimaev, and Chimaev's going to take the belt, man. It's going to be an insane card, that one. They always do, innit? UFC 200. That was another banger. That's what I see, man.
I love it. That would be cool, man. And I've been saying for a while, you know, let's get Chimaev in there. Let's draft him for this title shot. But instead, we're doing it this way. So it'll be done Saturday night, UFC 293. It's going down from Australia, guys. So make sure you tune in a little bit early. If you guys want more information, anything about our guests, about the show, about the channel, it's all linked in the description box below. Rich, why don't you go ahead and tell the people where they can find the work that you're doing?
Yeah, check me out on Twitter, man. I got a link to my Patreon with all the bets in the bio. And yeah, check me out for next week because I'm going to probably have a max bet on the Grasso and Shevchenko fight. I got a nice lean there. Done very well betting on Grasso. I think I've got a pin down. So yeah, big bet for that one. And yeah, man, let's cash some bets this week.
Absolutely. Love it. If you guys are looking for more information from me, you can find that in the description box below. You can find me on Patreon. You can find me in the Lab VIP doing my thing. You can also find me on social media, Twitter, Instagram, LiamPicksFights everywhere. Appreciate the support. If you guys want to take in this show on audio, if it's more convenient for you to listen to the podcast, no problem. Go ahead and search on podcast platforms, LiamPicksFights. You'll find all the shows that I do on this channel. That's Bets and Banter. That's the first look that we do as well. So stay tuned. The other thing I want to mention before we get out of here, guys, Plays and Fades YouTube channel. Make sure that you're subscribed there because next week I'm breaking down the Contender series with my guy Gordo. We had great success this week. We're looking to do the same thing next week, but it's on his channel. So make sure that you show some love, show some support. Our guy Gordo gambles, great mind in the space. And also we're doing that content together next week. So you're going to want to get subscribed now while you have the opportunity. So there you go, guys. We've got it done. Another great card in the books, another great show in the books. Hope that you guys all enjoy the fight card. God bless you all. Enjoy those fights. And until next time, come back and we're going to have all the same fun again. Take care, everybody.